The lead pencil had snapped off inside the heavy paper, leaving a dark smudge right where the final word should have been. On the wooden desk of the Blackwood Point light station, the logbook lay open to October 14, 1972. Senior keeper Samuel Thorne had written his standard weather report at 10 that night, followed by a final, trembling line. It read, "It is standing on the lower gallery, but it has no sen." The entry ended right there, the pencil dragging off the page, in a jagged stroke. Thomas stood in the dead silence of the tower chamber, holding his lantern high, feeling the ice-cold draft rising from the stairwell behind him. To understand why that half-finished sentence still haunts maritime history, we must go back 6 weeks earlier. In late September of 1972, Samuel Thorne and his assistant, Arthur Vance, were dropped off at the isolated granite rock off the coast of Maine. Their shift was meant to last 40 days. The Blackwood Light was an older station, relying on heavy brass clockwork, kerosene mantles, and absolute discipline. Samuel was a veteran keeper of 30 years, known for precise, almost dry log entries. Arthur was younger, quiet, and meticulous with maintenance. Friends described them both as grounded, practical men who understood the extreme isolation of offshore duty and never panicked under pressure. For the first week, the keepers maintained their strict routine. They trimmed the wicks every 4 hours, wound the heavy brass counterweights, and logged wind speed, sea state, and barometric pressure with clockwork precision. But on October 3rd, the first subtle anomaly appeared in the logbook. Samuel noted that the barometer had dropped to an impossibly low reading, yet the skies remained entirely clear and the sea stayed calm as glass. He wrote that the air inside the lantern room felt uncomfortably dense, like standing inside a sealed vault. When Arthur went down to check the fuel cisterns, he returned early, stating that the stone walls sounded as though they were humming beneath his palms. By October 6th, the log entries took a stranger turn. Samuel recorded an acoustic disturbance that repeated every night at 3:15 in the morning. Both men heard heavy, slow footsteps ascending the spiral iron staircase from the basement storage room. Each time Samuel opened the hatch to investigate, the staircase was completely dark and empty. Yet, the steps would resume 5 minutes later, moving steadily toward the sleeping quarters. Arthur began refusing to sleep during his off-shift, sitting at the kitchen table with a brass oil lamp burning beside him. Samuel noted in the margin that Arthur claimed the sound was not coming from boots on iron but from wet leather scraping against stone. On October 9th, Samuel recorded a disturbing physical change at the station. The brassware and copper mirrors inside the lantern tower had become coated in a thick, odorless gray residue. No matter how thoroughly Arthur polished the glass, the film returned within an hour, dimming the light to a dull orange glow. That night, the station radio lost all contact with the mainland. Instead of static, the speaker emitted a steady, slow rhythm, 3 metallic thuds, followed by 10 seconds of utter silence. Samuel wrote that he tested the equipment 3 times and found no electrical fault. The signal was not coming from the airwaves. It was originating from somewhere on the rock itself. The psychological toll became glaringly evident in the entry dated October 11th. Samuel wrote that Arthur had ceased speaking entirely. He sat motionless in the galley, refusing food, his eyes locked on the heavy oak door leading down to the landing stage. When Samuel attempted to take his shift at the lens, he found that Arthur had dragged 2 heavy iron supply crates and wedged them tightly against the interior doorframe. In the log, Samuel wrote, "Arthur believes something comes out of the surf when the tide reaches the lower mark. He says it stands at the base of the tower and waits for the light to pass over it before taking a step." The fog bell, mounted 30 feet above the crashing waves on the external catwalk, began to ring on the morning of October 13th. The wind was completely dead, and the sea was a flat sheet of black slate. Through the thick glass of the service room, Samuel watched the heavy bronze hammer strike the bell in slow, deliberate intervals. When he stepped out onto the iron gallery to stop it, he discovered the mechanical rope was snapped and tied off securely to the railing. The bell was swinging on its own pivot, moving as though 2 unseen hands were pulling it from below. Samuel returned inside, locked the iron hatch, and made his penultimate log entry. That brings us back to the final night, October 14th, 1972. The entry began with a notation of heavy fog rolling over the ledge. Samuel recorded that Arthur had gone missing from the living quarters sometime after midnight. His foul-weather coat and rubber boots were still hanging by the stove, completely dry. At 11:40 p.m., Samuel made his final mark in the book. He wrote that he could hear someone breathing on the outer balcony, directly against the storm pane. The last sentence was cut short as his pencil dug deep into the paper. It is standing on the lower gallery, but it has no, rather z short as someone urathor per. The sentence remained forever unfinished. When Thomas arrived with the relief crew 3 weeks later, he found the island completely deserted. The emergency rations were untouched, the lamps were trimmed, and the fire in the kitchen stove had long burned cold. If these eerie, unexplained historical mysteries fascinate you, please hit the like button and subscribe to help us share more forgotten stories. Thomas stood alone in the quiet lantern room, reading those final terrifying words in the logbook. Suddenly, a low, heavy thud echoed from the dark iron hatch beneath his feet, followed by the wet, rhythmic scraping of something slowly climbing the stairs toward the tower. Thomas immediately called his second mate up to the tower, but a thorough search of the rock yielded nothing. The station boat was still secured in its iron davits, undisturbed. The heavy brass keys to the oil store were hanging on their hook beside the logbook. There were no signs of struggle, no broken glass, and no blood. Coast Guard cutters searched the surrounding ocean for 2 full weeks, deploying divers around the underwater ledges. Neither Samuel Thorne nor Arthur Vance were ever found. Their raincoats, wallets, and personal watches remained inside their bunks, left behind as if they had simply evaporated into the thick October fog. The official Coast Guard inquiry in 1973 concluded that both keepers had likely been swept away by a rogue wave while attempting to service the fog signal. However, the meteorological records for October 14th showed complete calm across the entire region, with wave heights under 2 feet. Furthermore, the logbook entry was completely ignored in the official public findings, labeled as the rambling thoughts of a sleep-deprived man. Yet, maritime investigators privately noted one detail that was never explained. The inside surface of the lantern room glass was covered in hundreds of faint, unidentifiable smudges, all located 9 feet above the floorboards, where no human could reach. More than 50 years later, the mystery of Blackwood Light remains entirely unsolved. The light station was fully automated in 1976, leaving the stone tower silent and uninhabited. Thomas retired from the relief service shortly after that night on the rock. Today, he lives in a landlocked town far from the ocean, refusing to keep clocks in his house or remain near windows after dark. He still keeps a photocopied page of that final log entry locked in his desk drawer. He often tells friends that his greatest fear is not knowing what happened to Samuel and Arthur, but realizing that whatever walked up those stairs that night is still waiting there. Some places in this world seem to pull back the veil, exposing something ancient and patient that lives just beyond our understanding. Whatever stood on that narrow iron gallery in 1972 left no footsteps, no names, and no answers, only a single broken sentence written in the dark. If you have ever experienced an unsettling mystery or an encounter that defies explanation, please share your story in the comments below. Do not forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more strange, dark, and allegedly true stories. Until next time, keep your doors locked and stay safe in the dark.